We're told that kindness is its own reward, that compassion costs nothing, that mercy is a gift freely given. Fairy tales promise us that gentle hearts are protected by fate, that goodness summons goodness in return. But when you're born at the bottom of a hierarchy that measures worth in power, when your biology marks you as expendable before you take your first breath, you learn the devastating truth. Kindness is the most dangerous luxury an omega can afford. Because in a world where alphas rule and omegas serve, compassion isn't seen as virtue, it's seen as weakness. And weakness gets you killed. I learned this lesson 23 winters into my existence, on a night when the blizzard came howling down from the northern peaks, like the vengeance of forgotten gods. I learned it when I opened my door to dying wolves and sealed my fate with the most powerful pack in the 5 territories. I learned it when I discovered that sometimes salvation wears the face of destruction, and the monster you save becomes the one who devours your entire world. They say the Alpha King doesn't feel mercy. They say his pack is bound by blood oaths and brutal loyalty, that they've raised entire settlements for perceived disrespect, that his word is law written in the corpses of those who dared refuse him. They say omegas, who catch his attention, simply disappear. I never believed I'd learn if those stories were true, until 25 frostbitten wolves collapsed at my door, and the next morning, I opened it to find his entire pack waiting with the Alpha King himself standing at the front, his silver eyes fixed on me, with an intensity that felt like being seen for the very first time, and the very last. Before we begin Vera's journey, a quick note. If you love stories about rejected omegas, finding their strength and claiming their place, check out book titled Rejected by the Alpha, a glow-up revenge romance that will have you hooked from page 1. Link in the description. Now, let's dive into Vera's story. Chapter 1. The Omega Who Couldn't Shift. The cold came early that year. By the time the first snow fell, I'd already reinforced the shelter 3 times, patched the roof with salvaged tin sheets, stuffed moss and clay into the wall cracks, and bartered my entire summer's worth of preserved herbs for enough firewood to last through winter. The other omegas in the settlement called me paranoid. They said I was wasting resources on a structure that would be empty all season, that no wolf would venture this far into the borderlands when the great packs had warm dens and full bellies. But I knew better than to trust comfort. Comfort was a lie that killed you slowly. My name is Vera, and I am the omega who cannot shift. In a world where your worth is measured by the strength of your wolf, by the power of your transformation, by your ability to run with the pack, I am worthless. My wolf never came. Not during my first heat at 16, not during the initiation trials at 18, not during any of the forced awakening ceremonies my father subjected me to before he finally gave up and stopped claiming me as his daughter. I am human-locked, broken, a genetic dead end in a species that values bloodline above all else. The settlement tolerates me because I'm useful. I know herbs, which ones stop bleeding, which ones break fevers, which ones ease the pain of difficult births. I know how to set bones and stitch wounds and coax reluctant bodies back from the edge of death. My mother taught me before the sickness took her, before my father remarried, and had 3 perfect, shifting daughters who looked at me like I was a stain on the family name. So I live here, on the eastern edge of the borderlands, in a shelter I built with my own hands from the ruins of an abandoned watchtower. I trade my healing knowledge for food, for supplies, for the occasional kindness of wolves who forget to despise me for a few precious moments, and I survive, alone. The blizzard hit, on the 9th night of the frost moon. I'd been tracking the weather for days, watching the way the birds fled south in chaotic flocks, noticing how the deer moved to lower ground earlier than usual, feeling the particular quality of silence that comes before a storm tears the world apart. I'd sealed the shutters, brought in extra wood, and filled every container I owned with fresh water from the creek before it froze solid. I was prepared for isolation, for cold, for the possibility that this might be the winter I didn't survive. I was not prepared for the scratching at my door. At first, I thought it was the wind. The blizzard had been raging for 6 hours, turning the world outside into a whiteout scream of ice and fury. But the scratching came again, deliberate, weakening, then a sound that cut through the storm's howl, a whimper, low, pained, desperate. A wolf. Every instinct I'd honed over 23 years of survival told me not to open that door. Wolves didn't travel alone in blizzards. Wolves didn't seek help from omegas. And wolves who came to your door during a storm were either rabid, dying, or hunting. None of those options ended well for me, but the whimpering continued, growing fainter. And despite everything, despite knowing better, despite years of learning that my compassion was a weakness I couldn't afford, I found myself moving toward the door. My hands shook as I lifted the wooden bar. The wind nearly ripped the door from my grip the moment I cracked it open, and snow blasted into my face with stinging force. I could barely see 3 feet in front of me. Then the wolf collapsed across my threshold. He was massive, easily twice the size of any wolf I'd ever seen, with fur the color of storm clouds and blood matting his left shoulder. His breathing came in ragged gasps, and when his eyes met mine, I saw the glazed look of someone slipping toward unconsciousness. Toward death. No, I breathed, already reaching for him, already forgetting every lesson about self-preservation. No, you don't get to die on my doorstep. I grabbed his scruff. He was too heavy to lift, too far gone to help himself, and pulled. He barely moved. The wind shrieked around us, and I could feel the cold starting to seep into my bones, could feel my fingers going numb even through my gloves. Come on, I hissed through gritted teeth. Come on. I braced my feet against the doorframe and hauled with everything I had. He slid forward 6 inches, then another 6. Then finally, mercifully, his hindquarters cleared the threshold, and I slammed the door shut, throwing the bar back into place with shaking hands. The sudden silence was deafening. I collapsed against the door, gasping, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The wolf lay motionless on my floor, bleeding onto the rough wooden planks I'd salvaged from a collapsed barn last spring. He was dying. Obviously dying. And I'd just trapped myself inside a small shelter with a predator who outweighed me by 100 pounds. Brilliant. Vera, I muttered, pushing myself to my feet. Absolutely brilliant survival strategy. But I was already moving toward my healing supplies, already assessing his wounds with the clinical detachment my mother had taught me. Deep gash on the shoulder claws, not teeth. Blood loss significant, but not immediately fatal. Breathing labored but steady. Body temperature dropping rapidly. I could work with this. I spent the next hour in a blur of motion heating water, cleaning the wound, stitching the torn flesh with careful, practiced movements, while the wolf remained mercifully unconscious. I packed the wound with a poultice of yarrow and comfrey, wrapped it in clean cloth strips, and covered his body with every blanket I owned. Then I built up the fire until the shelter was almost uncomfortably warm, and collapsed into my chair to wait. That's when I heard the second scratching at my door. My blood went cold. Then a third scratch. A fourth. A chorus of whimpers and desperate sounds that made my stomach drop. There weren't just one wolf at my door. There were dozens. I stood slowly, my legs trembling, and approached the door with my heart in my throat. This was it. This was how I died, killed by a pack of dying wolves in a blizzard, in a shelter I'd built with my own hands, because I'd been stupid enough to show mercy. I lifted the bar. I opened the door, and I saw them, 25 wolves, maybe more, all collapsed in various states of distress in the snow outside my shelter. Some were barely moving. Others had clearly been trying to reach my door when their strength gave out. The blizzard still raged around them, burying them slowly in white. They were freezing to death, all of them. I should have closed the door, should have saved myself, should have accepted that I couldn't help them all, that trying would only kill me faster. Instead, I looked at those dying wolves and made the most foolish decision of my entire life. All right, I said quietly, to myself, to them, to whatever cruel god was watching. All right. Come on then. I propped the door open with a log and started dragging wolves inside. One by one, I hauled them across my threshold, some unconscious, some just barely aware enough to help me with weakening legs. I pulled until my muscles screamed, until my hands bled, until the shelter that had felt spacious for one person became a cramped maze of fur and bodies, and desperate, labored breathing. 25 wolves, 25 massive, powerful predators, packed into a space meant for a single omega. By the time I dragged the last one inside and barred the door against the storm, dawn was only a few hours away. My shelter had become a den of dying wolves, and I had become their only hope of survival. I fed the fire until it roared. I moved between them with water and what healing supplies I had left, treating the worst wounds first, trying to warm bodies that had been too long in the cold. Some of them were injured, claws marks, bite wounds, signs of a battle they'd fled from or lost. Others were simply lost, caught in the blizzard far from home. None of them tried to hurt me. None of them growled or snapped or showed any sign of aggression. They just lay there, watching me with eyes that held something I couldn't quite name, something that looked almost like recognition. By the time the blizzard finally broke and pale dawn light crept through the shutters, I was half dead, myself exhausted, running on nothing but determination, and the stubborn refusal to let these wolves die after I'd already worked so hard to save them. I'd done it. Against all logic, against all sense of self-preservation, I'd sheltered 25 freezing wolves through the worst blizzard I'd seen in 5 years, and as I finally collapsed into my chair, too tired to even close my eyes, I allowed myself one small moment of satisfaction. I'd saved them. I had no idea I'd just saved the Alpha King's entire inner pack. I had no idea that when I opened my door that morning, I would find 300 wolves standing outside in perfect military formation, all of them staring at my shelter with an intensity that made the air feel electric. I had no idea that the silver-eyed male standing at the front, the one who looked at me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve, was about to turn my entire world inside out. But I was about to learn. Chapter 2. The Alpha King at my door. I woke to silence. Not the howling fury of the blizzard, not the labored breathing of 25 dying wolves, just silence. Deep, crystalline, unnatural silence that made my skin prickle with instinctive unease. My fire had burned down to embers. Pale morning light filtered through the gaps in my shutters, painting thin silver lines across the floor. And the wolves, all 25 of them, were watching me. Not sleeping, not dying, watching. I sat up slowly, every muscle in my body screaming protest. My hands were raw and blistered, my shoulders felt like someone had beaten them with a club, and exhaustion sat heavy in my bones. But I was alive, and so, somehow, were they. The massive storm-gray wolf I'd pulled inside first was on his feet, still favoring his injured shoulder, but standing. His eyes tracked my movement with an intelligence that sent a chill down my spine. The others were in various states of recovery, but all of them were conscious, all of them watching. "Well," I said, my voice rough from hours of shouting over the storm. "Good morning to you too." None of them moved. They just stared at me with an intensity that felt like being examined under glass. I'd treated injured wolves before strays, mostly, or young ones who'd gotten separated from their packs, but they'd never looked at me like this. Like they were waiting for something, like I was supposed to understand something I didn't. I pushed myself to my feet, wincing as my knees protested. "The storm's over. You should probably..." The knock on my door cut me off mid-sentence. Not scratching, not whimpering, a knock. Deliberate, measured, unmistakably human-like in its intention. Every wolf in my shelter went rigid. My heart started hammering against my ribs. Nobody knocked on my door. Nobody visited my shelter. The other Omegas avoided me, and the higher-ranked wolves pretended I didn't exist. I'd built this place specifically to be forgotten, to be overlooked, to be safe through obscurity. The knock came again, patient, inevitable. I looked at the 25 wolves packed into my small space, all of them now alert, all of them focused on that door with an intensity that bordered on reverence. Or fear. I couldn't tell which. "Stay," I whispered, though I had no idea if they'd listen. Then I crossed to the door, lifted the bar with shaking hands, and pulled it open. The world outside had transformed overnight. The blizzard had buried everything under 3 feet of pristine snow that glittered in the morning sun like scattered diamonds. The sky was that particular shade of blue that only comes after a storm, clear, sharp, impossibly bright. And standing in front of my shelter, arranged in perfect military formation, were more wolves than I'd ever seen in one place. Hundreds of them, maybe 300, all massive, all powerful, all standing in absolute silence. And at the front, having just knocked on my door with a very human hand, stood a man who made every survival instinct I possessed scream at me to run. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with shoulders that spoke of violence and victory in equal measure. His hair was black as a raven's wing, pulled back from a face that could have been carved from granite. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. Silver. Not gray, not pale blue silver, like moonlight on water, like the edge of a blade, like something not quite human looking out from behind a human face. He wore the black leather and silver insignia of the Northern Pack. The ruling pack. The pack led by. No. Oh no. You're the Alpha King, I breathed, and it came out like an accusation, like a curse. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I am. His voice was deep, carrying the kind of authority that made you want to obey before you even understood the command. And you are the Omega who sheltered my inner pack through the blizzard. My mind went blank. His inner pack. The 25 wolves currently occupying every square inch of my shelter were his inner pack, his most trusted warriors, his personal guard, the wolves who were supposed to be the most dangerous in all 5 territories. I dragged them inside, stitched their wounds, covered them with my blankets. I was so dead. I didn't know, I said quickly, taking an involuntary step back. I didn't. They were dying. You saved them, he said it simply, like he was stating a fact about the weather. Then he did something that made my blood run cold. He dropped to one knee in the snow. Behind him, 300 wolves lowered their heads in perfect unison. The storm-gray wolf I'd pulled inside first limped out of my shelter and positioned himself at the Alpha King's right hand. And I realized with a jolt of shock that this wasn't just any inner pack member. This was his second, his most trusted commander. You saved my second's life, the Alpha King said. Still on one knee, still looking at me with those unsettling silver eyes. You saved 24 of my finest warriors. You opened your home to dying wolves in a blizzard when you had every reason to let us perish. You are owed a debt that cannot be repaid with mere gratitude. Get up, I said, panic making my voice sharp. Please, just get up. You don't owe me anything. What is your name, Omega? The question cut through my babbling like a knife. I swallowed hard. Vera. He said it like he was tasting it, learning its shape. I am Kai, Alpha King of the Northern Pack, Lord of the 5 territories, Keeper of the Blood Oaths. He rose to his feet in one fluid motion. And suddenly he was towering over me again, close enough that I could smell pine and snow and something wild on his skin. And you, Vera, have placed me in an impossible position. My stomach dropped. I don't understand. The blood debt. He gestured to his second, to the wolves behind him. By law of the old ways, when one saves the life of a pack member, that pack owes a debt. When one saves the life of an inner pack wolf, that debt extends to the entire pack. When one saves the life of 25 inner pack wolves, including the second. He paused, and something flickered in his silver eyes. Something almost like amusement. The debt becomes unsustainable. I don't want anything, I said desperately. I don't want payment, or acknowledgement, or anything. Just forget it happened. Please, forget. He repeated the word like it was foreign. You want me to forget that an Omega, a human-locked Omega living alone on the borderlands risked her life to save my inner pack, that she worked through the night to heal them, that she gave them her blankets, her fire, her shelter. He leaned closer, and I couldn't look away from those silver eyes. Tell me, Vera, do you know what we do to Omegas who catch my attention? The rumors, the disappearances, the stories whispered around fires about Omegas who were never seen again. I've heard stories, I whispered. What have you heard? That they disappear. That you... I couldn't finish the sentence. That I what? His voice was soft, dangerous. Take them? Hurt them? Kill them? I nodded, barely breathing. He studied me for a long moment, and I couldn't read his expression. Then, without warning, he threw back his head and laughed. It was a sound like thunder, rich and genuine and completely unexpected. Oh, little healer. he said when he finally stopped, and there was something almost fond in his voice. You're afraid I'm going to kidnap you, aren't you? No, he said it firmly, definitively. Then his expression shifted, becoming serious again. But I am going to offer you a choice, and you're not going to like either option. My hands curled into fists at my sides. What choice? Option 1. You accept a permanent place in my pack. You come to the Northern Keep as my personal healer, with status and protection and resources beyond anything you've known. You'll want for nothing, and no one will ever dare to harm you or question your worth again. It sounded like a dream. Like everything I'd ever been denied, wrapped up in a pretty package, and offered by the most powerful alpha in 5 territories, which meant it was a trap. And option 2? I asked. His smile was sharp as broken glass. Option 2, I leave 300 wolves outside your door in perpetual debt service until you accept option 1. They'll hunt for you, protect you, follow you everywhere. They'll make it impossible for you to continue living the quiet, invisible life you've built here. He paused. So really, little healer, it's not much of a choice at all. That's not fair, I said, and hated how my voice shook. No, he agreed. It's not. But I'm not asking you to be fair. I'm asking you to be smart. He gestured to the wolves around us. These wolves owe you their lives. By pack law, that debt must be honored. You can accept it gracefully and gain everything, or you can refuse and lose the only thing you seem to value, your solitude. I looked at the hundreds of wolves surrounding my shelter, all of them watching me with that same unsettling intensity. I looked at my small, safe space, the home I'd built with my own hands, the life I'd carved out of nothing. I looked at the Alpha King, whose silver eyes seemed to see straight through every defense I'd ever constructed, and I realized he was right. There was no choice. There never had been. If I come with you, I said slowly, if I accept your offer, what exactly would you expect from me? Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, that I was negotiating instead of simply refusing. You would serve as healer to my inner pack. You would live in the keep, with status equal to my advisors. You would have autonomy over your work and your life, with one exception. What exception? He stepped closer, and I fought the urge to retreat. You would be under my personal protection, which means you go nowhere without an escort. You speak to no one outside the pack without my knowledge, and you never, ever put yourself in danger the way you did last night. His voice dropped lower. I don't lose the wolves I claim, Vera. Not to storm, not to battle, not to their own foolish compassion. If you become mine, you stay mine. Understood? Become his. The word sent a shiver through me that wasn't entirely fear. And if I refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Then I hope you enjoy company, little healer. Because 300 wolves are about to become your permanent shadows. I looked at my shelter one last time, at the life I'd built. At the safety I'd created. At the obscurity that had kept me alive this long. Then I looked at the Alpha King, who was offering me everything I'd never dared to want and asking for my freedom in return. I thought about the storm gray wolf, his second, who I'd stitched back together without knowing who he was. I thought about the 24 other wolves who'd trusted me with their lives. I thought about how I'd spent my entire existence being told I was worthless, broken, disposable. And I thought about how, for one night, I'd been necessary, essential, enough. I need 3 days, I said, to settle my affairs, to say goodbye to. I gestured vaguely at the borderlands. To what? I had no friends here, no family who'd mourn my leaving. But I needed time. Time to process. Time to prepare. Time to convince myself I wasn't making the worst mistake of my life. Kai studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. 3 days. My second will remain here with 24 guards to ensure your safety. I don't need 300 wolves or 25, he said mildly. Your choice, little healer. I gritted my teeth. 25. Excellent. He turned to his second, who immediately stepped forward. Thorn will see to your needs. And Vera? He looked back at me, and his silver eyes were absolutely unreadable. Thank you. For saving them. for being brave enough to open your door when you had every reason to keep it closed. Then, before I could respond, he shifted. It should have been impossible. The shift happened so fast I couldn't track it. One moment there was a man. The next there was the largest wolf I'd ever seen, black as midnight, with those same silver eyes staring out from a predator's face. He was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. He turned and ran, and the massive pack followed him, a river of fur and power flowing through the snow, heading north toward the keep, leaving me standing in my doorway with 25 wolves and no idea what I'd just agreed to. Thorn, the storm gray wolf, who I now knew was the second, shifted back into his human form. He was younger than Kai, maybe mid-20s, with gray eyes and a wicked scar across his left cheekbone that matched the wound I'd stitched last night. "Well," he said, grinning at me with far too much amusement. "This is going to be interesting." I looked at my suddenly very crowded shelter, at the wolves who showed no sign of leaving, at the path the Alpha King had taken north. "I've made a terrible mistake," I said. Thorn's grin widened. "Oh, absolutely. But don't worry, little healer. We'll make sure you survive it." Somehow, that wasn't as comforting as he seemed to think it was. Chapter 3. The 3 Days of Truth. The first thing Thorn did after Kai left was reorganize my entire shelter. "You can't possibly think all 25 of us are staying inside," I protested as he directed wolves to form a perimeter around my small home. "There's barely enough room for 5, let alone." "We're not staying inside," Thorn said, his gray eyes gleaming with barely suppressed amusement. "We're staying close. There's a difference." He gestured to the wolves already positioning themselves in a wide circle around my shelter. "You get your space. We get to fulfill our duty. Everyone wins. This is absurd. This is pack law." He turned to face me fully. And despite his easy grin, there was steel underneath. "You saved our lives, Vera. Every single one of us would be frozen corpses if not for you. Do you really think we're going to let you out of our sight after that?" I wanted to argue. Wanted to point out that I'd lived alone for years without needing protection. That I was perfectly capable of taking care of myself. But the words died in my throat when I saw how the other wolves were looking at me, not with pity or contempt like I was used to, but with something that looked almost like reverence. It made my skin crawl. "Fine," I muttered, "but stay outside." I gestured helplessly. "I need space to think." Thorn's expression softened slightly. 3 days, little healer. Then everything changes. Use them wisely." He shifted and joined the others in their perimeter, leaving me alone in my shelter with my racing thoughts and the growing certainty that I'd just traded one kind of cage for another. The first day, I tried to maintain my normal routine. I checked my stores, the herbs I'd dried over summer, the preserved foods I'd bartered for, the medical supplies I'd carefully hoarded. I inventoried everything with meticulous care, making lists of what I'd need to bring, what I could leave behind, what would survive the journey north to the keep. The wolves watched me through the windows, not threateningly, not even intrusively. They just watched, like I was something precious that might disappear if they looked away. It was unnerving. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my gathering basket and pushed open the door. "I need to collect some plants before the snow buries them completely. I'm going to the eastern ridge." Thorn, in human form again, fell into step beside me immediately. "I'll accompany you." "I don't need." "Humor me," he said, and there was something in his voice that made it clear this wasn't a request. We walked in silence through the snow-covered forest, me searching for the winter-hardy plants I needed, him following a few steps behind like a well-trained shadow. After an hour of this awkward dance, I finally snapped. "Why are you really here?" I demanded, spinning to face him. "And don't say it's about pack law or debt. The Alpha King could have just thanked me and left. Instead, he's essentially conscripting me into his pack and leaving his entire inner guard to babysit me." "Why?" Thorn studied me for a long moment, his scarred face thoughtful. "You really don't understand what you did, do you?" "I pulled some wolves out of a storm. It's not." "You pulled the Alpha King's inner pack out of a storm," he interrupted. "Do you know what we were doing in the borderlands during a blizzard, Vera? Do you know why we were there?" I I shook my head. We were hunting traitors. His voice went hard. 3 packs in the southern territories have been organizing a rebellion. They want to overthrow Kai, fracture the alliance, return to the old ways where might makes right, and omegas like you are property, not people. He took a step closer. We'd tracked them to a compound near the border. The battle went badly. We were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and when the blizzard hit, we were separated from the main force. We should have died. My mouth went dry. But you didn't. No, we didn't. Because a human-locked Omega took one look at dying wolves and decided they were worth saving. He smiled, but there was something fierce in it. Do you know what that makes you, little healer? It makes you dangerous. It makes you valuable. It makes you exactly the kind of person Kai needs in his pack. Someone who acts on compassion instead of politics. Someone who sees worth in broken things. I'm not. You are, though. He said it gently. You're broken in the same way he is. You just don't know it yet. The words sent a chill through me. What do you mean? But Thorn just shook his head. That's not my story to tell. Come on. We should head back before it gets dark. We walked back to my shelter in silence, but his words echoed in my head long after the sun set. You're broken in the same way he is. What did that mean? The Alpha King was powerful, feared, respected. I was none of those things. We had nothing in common except he'd knelt in the snow for me. Offered me status and protection when he could have just taken what he wanted by force. Looked at me with those silver eyes like I was something more than the worthless Omega everyone else saw. I didn't sleep that night. The second day, the other Omegas came. I was outside checking on the wolves' makeshift camp when I saw them approaching 5 females from the settlement, including my half-sister, Alara. They walked with the careful neutrality of people approaching a volatile situation, and they stopped a respectful distance from Thorn's perimeter. Vera, Alara called out, her perfect face arranged in an expression of concern that didn't reach her eyes. We heard about what happened with the Alpha King. We wanted to make sure you were all right. No, you didn't, I thought. You want to know what favor I gained, what advantage I might have, what this means for your own position in the settlement's fragile hierarchy. But I walked over anyway, because some habits were too ingrained to break. I'm fine. Thank you for your concern. Is it true? Asked Mira, one of the younger Omegas. Her eyes were wide with something between fear and fascination. Is the Alpha King really taking you to the Northern Keep? He's offered me a position as pack healer, I said carefully. A position. Alara's lip curled. How generous of him. And what did you have to promise in return, sister? The contempt in her voice was familiar. Expected. But it still stung. Nothing, I said. I saved his inner pack during the blizzard. This is how he's chosen to honor that debt. By dragging you away from your home? How romantic. She stepped closer, and I saw the real emotion underneath her polished exterior jealousy. Raw and bitter. You've always been strange, Vera. Always choosing herbs and healing over finding a proper mate. Always living out here like an exile when you could have tried to integrate. And now, somehow, you've caught the attention of the most powerful alpha in 5 territories. She laughed, and it was a cruel sound. I wonder how long it will take before he realizes his mistake. Elara, we all know why you really saved those wolves, she continued, her voice rising. You're desperate. Desperate for validation, for purpose, for someone to finally see worth in a broken Omega who can't even shift. So you risked everything on a gamble, and somehow, impossibly, it paid off. But don't think for one moment that changes what you are. The words hit like physical blows, each one precisely aimed at the wounds I carried. And the worst part was that she wasn't entirely wrong. I had been desperate. I had wanted to matter, to be necessary, to prove that my existence meant something. That's enough. Thorn's voice cut through the clearing like a blade. He'd moved between us without my noticing, his body language pure threat. You will speak to the future pack healer with respect, or you will leave. Now. Alara paled. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. He looked at each of the Omegas in turn, and whatever they saw in his expression made them all take a step back. Let me make something very clear. Vera is under the Alpha King's personal protection. Any insult to her is an insult to him. Any harm to her will be answered with the full force of the Northern Pack. And any Omega who thinks she's somehow less because she can't shift. His smile was all teeth. Should remember that she accomplished more in one night than any of you have in your entire lives. The Omegas fled. All except Alara, who stood there for one more moment, her expression twisted with something I couldn't quite name. Then she turned and walked away, her spine rigid with barely suppressed fury. I stood there, in the snow, shaking. You didn't have to do that, I said quietly. Yes, Thorn said. I did. He looked down at me, and his expression was surprisingly gentle. You're Pack now, Vera, or you will be in 2 days, and Pack protects its own. I'm not Pack yet, aren't you? He gestured to the wolves surrounding my shelter, 25 of the most dangerous warriors in the 5 territories, all of them watching me with that same intense focus. They chose you the moment you opened your door, little healer. Everything else is just formality. I wanted to argue. Wanted to point out that I hadn't chosen them, that I'd never asked for this, that I still wasn't sure I wanted any of it, but the words wouldn't come, because some small, broken part of me, the part that had spent 23 years being told I was worthless, was desperately, dangerously grateful that someone had finally chosen me, even if I didn't fully understand why. Subscribe if you believe broken people deserve second chances, because Omegas like Vera need voices that won't let the world forget them. Drop a comment if you've ever felt worthless and needed someone to prove you wrong. Vera's fighting for all of us who've been called not enough. The 3rd day, Kai returned. He came alone this time, walking through the forest with the kind of confident grace that suggested he'd never needed a pack for protection. He was in human form, dressed in the same black leather and silver insignia, and his silver eyes found me immediately where I sat outside my shelter, doing a final inventory of my supplies. Walk with me, he said. Not a question, not quite a command, something in between. I stood and followed him into the trees, very aware of Thorn and the others watching us go but making no move to follow. This, apparently, was a conversation meant to be private. We walked for several minutes in silence before Kai finally spoke. You've been crying. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. My half-sister came to visit yesterday. She reminded me of some truths I'd been trying to forget. What truths? That I'm broken, that I'm desperate, that the only reason you're interested in me is because I happen to be convenient when your pack needed help. I kept my eyes on the snow-covered ground. That I'm fooling myself if I think this is anything more than obligation on your part. Kai stopped walking. Look at me, Vera. I didn't want to, but something in his voice made it impossible to refuse. I raised my eyes to meet his, and the intensity in them stole my breath. I am going to tell you something, he said quietly. And I need you to hear it. Really hear it. Can you do that? I nodded, not trusting my voice. You are not broken. You are inconvenient to a society that measures worth in power and defines value by the ability to shift. But that society is wrong. He took a step closer. I have commanded packs for 15 years. I have led battles, negotiated treaties, executed traitors, and built an alliance that spans 5 territories. I have seen strength in 1,000 different forms. And what you did 3 nights ago, opening your door to dying wolves when you had every reason to fear us, to let us die, to protect yourself first, that took more courage than any battle I've ever fought. You don't understand, I whispered. I'm not brave. I'm just broken? His smile was sharp. Good. So am I. I stared at him. What? My father was a tyrant, he said, and his voice went flat with old pain. He ruled through fear, through violence, through the systematic brutalization of anyone he perceived as weak. Omegas were property in his pack, disposable, less than nothing. He paused. When I took power 15 years ago, I swore I would build something different. A pack where strength came from loyalty, not terror, where Omegas had autonomy and protection, where being born without a shift didn't mean being born worthless. My chest tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand why I can't let you go. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You represent everything I've been trying to build, An Omega who saved lives, not because she was ordered to, not because she hoped for reward, but because she couldn't do anything else. Because her compassion was stronger than her survival instinct. He reached out and tilted my chin up, forcing me to hold his gaze. You are not convenient, Vera. You are essential. And if you join my pack, it won't be out of obligation. It will be because I have spent 15 years looking for someone exactly like you, and I am not fool enough to let you slip away now that I've found you. The words hit me like a tidal wave. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what he was saying. I don't understand, I managed. You will. He released my chin but didn't step back. 3 days ago, you opened your door to dying wolves. Tomorrow, I'm asking you to walk through mine, not as payment of a debt, not as an obligation, but as a choice. My pack needs a healer who sees value in broken things. And I. He paused, and something flickered in his silver eyes. I need someone who isn't afraid of monsters. I am afraid, I whispered. I'm terrified. Good. His smile was almost gentle. Fear means you're smart enough to understand the stakes. But the question isn't whether you're afraid, little healer. It's whether you're brave enough to come anyway. We stood there in the snow-covered forest, the Alpha King and the broken Omega, and I felt the weight of the choice settling over me like a physical thing. Tomorrow, I could stay here, in my small, safe shelter, in my quiet, invisible life, alone. Or I could walk through his door, into the unknown, into danger and possibility, and a future I couldn't begin to predict. I need you to promise me something, I said finally. Name it. If I come with you, if I join your pack, you have to promise me autonomy. Real autonomy. Not just pretty words about protection and status. I need to know that I'm making this choice for myself, not because you're giving me no other option. Kai studied me for a long moment, then he nodded. You will have autonomy over your work, your quarters, and your life within the keep. You will answer to no one but me, and I will never command you to do anything that violates your conscience or your calling as a healer. He paused. But I will not compromise on your safety. Escorts, guards, protection, those are non-negotiable. It was more than I'd expected, more than I'd dared to hope for. All right, I said. All right, I'll come with you. Just like that? Just like that. I met his silver eyes and felt something shift in my chest, something that felt almost like hope. You said you need someone who isn't afraid of monsters. Maybe I need someone who isn't afraid of broken things. Kai's smile could have lit the entire forest. Then we have an accord, little healer. Tomorrow at dawn, your new life begins. He turned and walked back toward my shelter, and I followed, my heart pounding with equal parts terror and anticipation. Tomorrow, everything would change. I just hoped I was strong enough to survive it. Chapter 4. The Journey North. Dawn came too quickly. I stood in my shelter, the home I'd built with my own hands, the sanctuary I'd created from nothing, and tried to memorize every detail. The way morning light filtered through the eastern window, the scent of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, the rough texture of the wooden walls I'd chinked with moss and clay during my first desperate winter alone. This place had saved my life, and now I was leaving it behind. Ready? Thorn appeared in the doorway, his gray eyes gentle with understanding. Behind him, I could see the other wolves already forming up for the journey, their breath misting in the cold morning air. No, I said honestly. But I don't think I ever will be. He smiled. That's the spirit, little healer. Come on, Kai's waiting. I picked up my pack, pitifully small, containing only my most essential supplies and a few personal items I couldn't bear to leave behind. Everything else would stay here, waiting for someone who would never return. The thought made my throat tight. Outside, the world was painted in shades of blue and silver, the sun just beginning to crest the eastern ridge. And there, standing at the head of a formation of 25 wolves, was Kai. He was in human form, dressed for travel in dark leather and furs, and when his silver eyes met mine, something in my chest constricted painfully. Last chance, he said quietly as I approached. Say the word, and I'll leave you in peace. We both knew it was a lie. He'd already told me the debt wouldn't allow it, that I'd be followed and protected whether I wanted it or not. But the offer itself, the pretense of choice, was oddly comforting. "I'm coming," I said, and tried to sound more certain than I felt. Kai nodded once, then gestured to his second. "Thorn will carry your pack. You'll ride with me." I blinked. "Ride? The keep is 2 days' journey north. You can't make that distance on foot in winter conditions." His expression was unreadable. "You'll shift and—" He paused, seeing my face. "Ah, right. You can't." The familiar shame crawled up my spine. "I can walk. I'm slower than wolves, but I can—" "You'll ride," Kai interrupted firmly. "Thorn, shift." The second obeyed immediately, transforming into his massive storm-gray wolf form. Kai turned to me expectantly, and I realized with dawning horror what he was suggesting. "You want me to ride a wolf," I said flatly. "I want you to ride my second. Specifically. He's the steadiest, and he won't throw you even if we encounter trouble." Kai's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. "Unless you'd prefer to ride me instead?" The suggestion sent an unexpected bolt of heat through me. "That's no. Thorn is fine. Thorn is perfect." Kai's smile widened into something decidedly wolfish. "Pity. Maybe another time." Before I could formulate a response to that, he was helping me onto Thorn's back. The wolf was enormous, easily tall enough that mounting him required Kai's assistance, and his fur was thick and warm beneath my hands. I settled into position awkwardly, very aware that I had no idea what I was doing. "Hold tight to his fur," Kai instructed. "Press with your knees to stay balanced, and whatever you do, don't fall off." Thorn's ego couldn't handle it. The wolf beneath me made a sound that was almost like laughter. Then Kai shifted that impossible to track transformation from man to massive black wolf, and the pack began to move. The journey north was unlike anything I'd experienced. Riding Thorn was terrifying at first. He moved with a fluid grace that made me feel like I was going to slide off at any moment, and the speed at which the pack traveled made my heart lodge firmly in my throat. But gradually, I learned to move with him, to anticipate the rhythm of his gait, to trust that he wouldn't let me fall. Kai ran at the front, his black fur stark against the snow, and I couldn't stop watching him. He moved like liquid shadow, powerful and precise, and every few minutes he'd glance back, checking on me, making sure I was still secure. The attention should have been suffocating. Instead, it felt almost protective. We stopped at midday in a clearing where the sun had melted through the snow to expose frozen grass beneath. The wolves formed a defensive perimeter automatically while Thorn knelt to let me dismount. My legs were shaking when my feet hit the ground, and I would have fallen if Kai, now in human form, hadn't caught my elbow. "You're doing well," he said. "I feel like I've been beaten with a tree branch." "That's normal. Your muscles aren't used to riding." He guided me to a fallen log and pressed a water skin into my hands. "Drink. Eat something. We'll rest for an hour before continuing." I drank gratefully, then pulled out the dried meat and bread I'd packed. Around me, the other wolves were transforming back into human form, speaking in low voices as they checked weapons and discussed the route ahead. I felt profoundly out of place among them, these hardened warriors with their scars and their easy camaraderie. "You're staring," Kai observed, settling onto the log beside me. Close enough that our shoulders brushed. "I'm just trying to understand." I gestured to the wolves around us. "You're the Alpha King. You command respect from the most powerful packs in 5 territories. Your inner pack is legendary, and you're using all this power to transport one worthless Omega north because she happened to open her door during a storm. You're not worthless. Everyone else seems to think so. Everyone else is wrong." He said it with such finality that I almost believed him. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Vera?" I shook my head. "I see someone who survived alone for years, in conditions that would have killed most wolves. I see someone who built a home with her own hands, who learned healing without a teacher, who chose compassion over self-preservation when it mattered most." He turned to face me fully, and his silver eyes were intense. "I see strength that has nothing to do with shifting, and that's exactly the kind of strength I need in my pack." "Why?" The word came out as barely more than a whisper. "Why do you need that specifically?" Kai was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was low enough that only I could hear. Because I'm building something that's never existed before. A pack structure where power comes from loyalty and competence, not just physical dominance, where omegas have agency and betas have voice, and everyone, regardless of how they were born, has a chance to matter. He looked at me. But that vision is fragile. The old guard wants to return to the brutal hierarchy my father enforced. They see my reforms as weakness. They're waiting for any excuse to challenge me, to fracture the alliance, to return to the days when might made right. What does that have to do with me? Everything. His smile was sharp. You're a symbol, little healer. An Omega who saved the Alpha King's inner pack. An Omega who earned a place in the Northern Keep through action, not through birth or favor. If I can integrate you successfully, if I can show that an Omega can have status and respect and power in my pack, it strengthens every reform I've implemented. It proves that the new way works. Understanding crashed over me like a wave. You're not just offering me a position, you're making a political statement. Yes. And if I fail? If I can't handle the pressure or the danger then I fail with you. He said it simply, like it was obvious. But I don't think you're going to fail, Vera. I think you're going to surprise everyone, including yourself. I wanted to believe him, but 23 years of being told I was worthless, broken, disposable, that wasn't something I could shake off with one conversation. What if you're wrong about me? I asked quietly. I'm not. He stood, offering me his hand. Come on. We should keep moving. I want to reach the northern watchtower before dark. I took his hand and let him pull me to my feet. His grip was warm and solid, and he held on for a moment longer than necessary before releasing me. Kai? I said as he turned to leave. Yes. Thank you. I gestured helplessly, for seeing something worth saving. His expression softened in a way I hadn't seen before. Always, little healer. Always. Then he shifted, and the pack was moving again, carrying me north toward a future I still couldn't quite believe was real. We reached the northern watchtower just as the sun was setting. The structure was massive, a stone fortification built into the mountainside, with walls 20 feet high and watch posts at every corner. It was clearly military in function, designed to monitor the northern passes and provide early warning of invasion. As we approached, I could see wolves patrolling the walls, their eyes tracking our movement with professional precision. Kai led us through the main gates, and immediately the atmosphere changed. Wolves in northern pack insignia saluted as he passed, their fists over their hearts, their heads bowed in respect. He acknowledged each one with a slight nod, his bearing regal and commanding. I'd known he was the Alpha King intellectually, but seeing it in practice, seeing how hundreds of wolves responded to his presence with instant obedience, brought home exactly how powerful he was, and how dangerous. We were given quarters in the eastern tower, a large room with multiple sleeping areas and a central fireplace. The other inner pack wolves dispersed to their own spaces, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and growing anxiety. This was really happening. Tomorrow, I would reach the keep. Tomorrow, my new life would begin. Tomorrow, I would find out if Kai's faith in me was justified or catastrophically misplaced. I was still staring at the fire when Thorn appeared with a tray of food. You should eat, he said, setting it beside me. Long day tomorrow. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. He settled across from me, his scarred face thoughtful. You're scared. It wasn't a question. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's been where you are. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. I was born a beta, you know. No alpha blood, no special gifts. Just decent combat skills and a stubborn refusal to die. When Kai offered me a position in his inner pack, I thought he was insane. I thought I'd get myself killed within a week. What changed? I realized that Kai doesn't choose people based on their bloodline or their ability to shift. He chooses them based on their character. Thorn looked at me directly. He chose me because I was loyal. He chose the others because they were brave, or smart, or skilled in ways that mattered. And he chose you because you're compassionate, because you see worth in broken things, because you're exactly what he needs to prove that the new way works. That's a lot of pressure. Yes, Thorn agreed. It is. But here's the thing. Little healer, you've already survived impossible pressure. You've lived alone on the borderlands for years. You've built a life from nothing. You've faced death and chosen to save others anyway. He smiled. If you can do all that, you can survive the keep. You can survive the politics and the danger and the wolves who will test you at every turn, because you're stronger than you think you are. I wish I believed that. You will. He stood, stretching. Get some rest. Tomorrow, everything changes. And Vera? He paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm glad you opened your door that night. I'm glad you saved us. And I'm glad you're coming with us. The pack needs someone like you. He left before I could respond, leaving me alone with the fire and my thoughts. I lay down on the sleeping pallet and stared at the stone ceiling, listening to the sounds of the watchtower around me. Wolves moving through corridors, guards changing shifts, the distant howl of wind through the mountain passes. Tomorrow, I would reach the northern keep. Tomorrow, I would step into a new life. Tomorrow, I would find out if Kai's vision of a better pack was real or just another beautiful lie. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but my mind was too full of silver eyes and impossible promises and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that maybe, just maybe, I was finally going somewhere I belonged. Chapter 5. The Northern Keep. I woke to the sound of activity wolves preparing for the final leg of our journey, voices calling instructions, the clatter of supplies being loaded. Dawn light filtered through the narrow window, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Today I would see the Northern Keep. Today my new life would truly begin. I dressed quickly in the warmest clothes I owned, practical, patched, nothing like what I imagined the other wolves at the keep would wear. My reflection in the polished metal mirror showed a woman who looked terrified and determined in equal measure. An Omega about to walk into the den of the most powerful pack in 5 territories. What could possibly go wrong? Ready? Kai's voice came from the doorway, and I turned to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. As I'll ever be. Good. He stepped into the room, and I noticed he was carrying a bundle of dark fabric. Before we leave, there's something you need to understand about the keep. My stomach tightened. What? It's not like the borderlands, not like your settlement. The keep houses over 500 wolves, my inner pack, the guard, advisors, visiting dignitaries from other territories. It's a functioning court, not just a military installation. He unfolded the fabric, revealing a beautiful cloak in deep midnight blue, lined with silver fur. Which means there are protocols, expectations, ways of presenting yourself that matter. I stared at the cloak. I don't understand. You're arriving as my personal healer. That position carries significant status equal to my senior advisors. You'll be housed in the upper levels of the keep, given access to restricted areas, included in important meetings. He held out the cloak. You need to look the part. I took it hesitantly. The fabric was impossibly soft, clearly expensive, nothing like anything I'd ever owned. Kai, I can't. You can. And you will. His voice was firm but not unkind. I know this feels like putting on a costume, but appearance matters at court, Vera. It's a language everyone understands. This cloak tells every wolf in the keep that you're under my direct protection, that you have status, that you're not to be dismissed or disrespected. What if I can't live up to it? Then you'll learn. He stepped closer, and his silver eyes were intense. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm asking you to claim the space you've earned. You saved my inner pack. You deserve to walk into that. Keep with your head high. I wanted to argue, wanted to point out that I'd spent my entire life learning to be invisible, that visibility was dangerous for Omegas like me, but the look in his eyes stopped me. He believed it. He actually believed I belonged there. So I put on the cloak. It settled around my shoulders like a promise, heavy and warm and unmistakably expensive. Kai fastened the silver clasp at my throat, his fingers brushing my collarbone, and I felt something shift in the air between us. Perfect, he said quietly. Now you look like what you are, someone worth protecting. The final approach to the Northern Keep was breathtaking. We crested a ridge just after midday, and suddenly the entire structure spread out before us like something from a fairy tale. The keep was built into the mountainside itself, a massive fortress of gray stone and silver spires that seemed to grow organically from the rock. Watchtowers rose at intervals along the walls, banners bearing the Northern Pack's insignia, a silver wolf on a black field snapping in the wind. But it was the scale that stole my breath. The keep was enormous, easily large enough to house 1,000 wolves, with multiple levels carved into the mountain and defensive walls that looked capable of withstanding a siege. This wasn't just a pack house. This was a seat of power. "Home," Kai said, pulling up beside me. He'd stayed in wolf form for most of the journey, but now he shifted back, standing at my side as Thorn knelt to let me dismount. "What do you think?" "I think I'm severely underprepared for this." His laugh was warm. "You'll do fine, little healer. Come, there are people you need to meet." We descended toward the keep, and as we approached the main gates, I could see wolves gathering, drawn by news of the Alpha King's return, by curiosity about the Omega he'd brought with him, by the desire to witness whatever was about to unfold. The gates opened, and we walked through into a massive courtyard. Hundreds of wolves lined the space guards at attention, courtiers in fine clothes, servants pausing in their work, all of them staring, all of them trying to understand what an unknown Omega was doing. Wearing a cloak that marked her as high status, walking at the Alpha King's side like she belonged there. Kai didn't slow. He cut straight through the crowd, his presence commanding instant respect, and I followed in his wake with my heart hammering against my ribs. We entered the keep proper through enormous wooden doors carved with scenes of wolf packs and ancient battles. The interior was surprisingly beautiful, soaring ceilings, supported by massive timber beams, tapestries depicting pack history hanging from stone walls, fires burning in hearths large enough to roast an entire deer. But there was also an undercurrent of tension. Wolves watched us pass with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion to barely concealed hostility. I could feel the weight of their judgment, their questions, their doubts about whether I belonged here. Kai led me through a maze of corridors, up several flights of stairs, until we finally stopped before a set of double doors on what I assumed was one of the upper levels. "Your quarters," he said, pushing them open. I stepped inside and froze. The suite was larger than my entire shelter had been, a main living area with comfortable furniture arranged around a massive fireplace, a separate sleeping chamber visible through an archway, tall windows overlooking the mountains, and along one wall, floor-to-ceiling shelves already stocked with books and supplies. "This is too much," I said faintly. "This is appropriate for your position." Kai moved to the windows, looking out over his territory. "Your healing room is 2 doors down, fully equipped, connected to the main infirmary. You'll have assistants if you want them, autonomy to run it as you see fit." He turned back to me. "And before you argue, yes, you've earned this. Yes, you belong here. And no, I won't accept any protests about it being too much." I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll make yourself at home. Say you'll give this a real chance." His expression softened. "Say you'll stay." The vulnerability in that last request caught me off guard. This powerful alpha, this king who commanded hundreds of wolves, was asking, not ordering me to stay. "I'll stay," I said quietly. "I'll try. That's all I ask." He moved toward the door, then paused. "There's a formal dinner tonight. The senior pack members will be there, my advisors, the inner pack, some visiting dignitaries. I want to introduce you properly, establish your position, make it clear that you're under my protection." My stomach dropped. A formal dinner, with hundreds of wolves. 20, actually. Small, intimate, just the leadership. His smile was slightly wicked. "Consider it your official welcome to court. I don't know how to navigate court politics." "Then you'll learn. Quickly." He sobered. "I won't lie to you, Vera. Tonight will be difficult. Some of my advisors still believe in the old ways that Omegas should be seen and not heard, that your presence here undermines pack hierarchy. They'll test you, question you, try to find weaknesses. That's supposed to make me feel better about attending? No. But I want you prepared." He held my gaze. "You don't have to prove yourself to them. You don't have to defend your position. You simply have to be yourself, the same Omega who opened her door to dying wolves because it was the right thing to do. Can you do that? I thought about my shelter, about the choice I'd made during the blizzard, about the fact that I'd somehow survived this long by being exactly who I was, even when everyone told me I should be someone else. Yes, I said. I can do that. Good. Kai's smile was approving. Dinner is at sunset. Someone will come to escort you. Until then, rest, explore your quarters, get comfortable. He paused at the door. And Vera, thank you for being brave enough to come here, for giving my vision a chance. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in quarters far too grand for a broken Omega, with a formal dinner looming, and no idea how to survive what was coming. I sank into one of the chairs by the fire and tried to calm my racing heart. I spent the afternoon exploring. My quarters were connected to a private bathing room, an actual bathing room, with heated water and soaps that smelled of lavender and pine. I took advantage of it, washing away days of travel and trying to prepare myself mentally for the evening ahead. Someone had left clothes in the wardrobe, several dresses in rich fabrics, all in deep blues and silvers that matched my cloak. I chose the simplest one, a midnight blue gown with silver embroidery at the cuffs and collar. It fit perfectly, which suggested someone had been paying very close attention to my measurements. I was just finishing braiding my hair when a knock came at the door. "Come in," I called, expecting a servant. Instead, a female wolf entered, tall and elegant, with auburn hair and sharp green eyes that assessed me in one sweeping glance. She wore the black and silver of the Northern Pack, and her bearing suggested high rank. "You're the Omega," she said without preamble. "I'm Vera," I corrected, lifting my chin. "And you are?" A slight smile curved her lips. "Direct. I like that. I'm Sienna, Alpha King's senior advisor and head of the council." She moved further into the room, her gaze taking in everything. "I'm here to escort you to dinner and give you some advice that might keep you alive." "How comforting." "I'm not here to comfort you." She settled into a chair across from me, crossing her legs with casual grace. "I'm here because Kai asked me to help you navigate tonight, and I owe him enough loyalty to try. But let's be clear, I don't understand why you're here. I don't understand what Kai sees in an Omega who can't shift, and I certainly don't understand why he's giving you status that took the rest of us decades to earn." Her honesty was brutal, and oddly refreshing. "I saved his inner pack during the blizzard," I said steadily. "That's why I'm here." "So I heard." Sienna leaned forward, her green eyes intense. "Here's what you need to understand, Vera. The Northern Pack is not like other packs. We don't operate on simple dominance hierarchies. We operate on competence, loyalty, and results. Kai has spent 15 years building this structure, fighting against wolves who want to return to the brutal ways of his father's reign. Your presence here, an Omega with high status, is either proof that his vision works, or it's ammunition for his enemies to claim he's gone soft. So I'm a political liability. You're a test case." She said it bluntly. "If you succeed, if you prove that an Omega can have value beyond traditional roles, you strengthen every reform Kai has implemented. If you fail, you give the old guard exactly what they need to challenge him. That's a lot of pressure for one Omega to carry." "Yes," Sienna agreed. "It is. Which is why I'm here to help you survive tonight." She stood, smoothing her dress. "At dinner, sit where Kai places you. Don't speak unless directly addressed. Don't rise to obvious provocations. And for the love of the old gods, don't show weakness. These wolves will test you with questions, with subtle insults, with challenges designed to make you fail. Your job is to remain calm, answer honestly, and remember that you've already earned your place here." "Have I, though?" Sienna studied me for a long moment. "You opened your door to dying wolves when you had every reason to let them die. You risked your life for strangers. You showed compassion when survival instinct should have made you cruel." She paused. "I don't understand it, but I respect it. And if you can show even half that courage tonight, you'll be fine." It was the closest thing to approval I'd gotten from anyone except Kai and Thorn. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Don't thank me yet." Sienna moved to the door. "Come, it's time. And Vera? Remember, you're not just representing yourself tonight. You're representing every Omega who's ever been told they're worthless. Don't let them down." The weight of that responsibility settled over me like a physical thing as I followed her out into the corridor. Dinner awaited, and with it, the real test of whether I belonged in the Northern Keep or whether I'd just made the worst mistake of my life. Chapter 6: The Council's Test. The dining hall was intimate in a way that made it more intimidating, not less. A single long table dominated the space, carved from dark wood and polished to a mirror shine. Candles flickered in silver holders, casting dancing shadows on stone walls hung with tapestries depicting wolves in various stages of triumph. 20 chairs surrounded the table, and 17 of them were already occupied when Sienna led me through the door. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to me. I felt their assessment like physical touch, taking in my dress, my cloak, the way I carried myself, looking for weakness, looking for proof that I didn't belong here. Kai sat at the head of the table, and when his silver eyes met mine, something in my chest loosened slightly. He stood, and the gesture forced everyone else to stand as well. A subtle demonstration of power that wasn't lost on anyone present. "Counselors, honored guests," Kai said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "May I present Vera, healer to the inner pack and newest member of our court." He gestured to the empty chair at his right hand, the position of highest honor, traditionally reserved for his second or his most trusted advisor. Placing me there was a statement, a declaration that I held value in his eyes. It also painted a target on my back. I crossed to the chair with my head high, very aware of the weight of every gaze following my movement. Kai held the chair for me, another deliberate gesture of respect before reclaiming his own seat. The others settled back into their chairs with varying degrees of grace, and I could practically feel the speculation crackling through the air. "Let me make introductions," Kai continued smoothly. "You've met Sienna, my senior advisor." He gestured to the elegant auburn-haired woman who'd escorted me, seated 3 chairs down. "To your left is Thorn, my second." Thorn grinned at me, the scar on his cheek pulling with the expression. "We're already well acquainted." A ripple of laughter moved through some of the assembled wolves, those who'd been part of the rescue, who understood the reference. But others remained stony-faced. Kai continued around the table, naming advisors and council members whose titles and roles blurred together in my anxious mind. Military commanders, trade negotiators, territory representatives, all of them powerful, all of them watching me with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. The last introduction made my stomach drop. And finally, our guest from the Eastern Pack, Alpha Dominic, here to discuss the trade agreements between our territories. The man at the far end of the table was perhaps 50, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that assessed me with the cold calculation of a predator evaluating prey. He wore the green and gold of the Eastern Pack, and something about the way he looked at me made my skin crawl. "An Omega healer," Dominic said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. "How progressive of you. Alpha King. Though I confess, I'm surprised to see one seated at your council table. In the Eastern Territories, we find Omegas serve the pack better, in more traditional roles." The challenge was immediate and unmistakable. "In the Northern Pack," Kai said, his tone perfectly pleasant and absolutely deadly, "we find that competence matters more than tradition. Vera saved 25 of my inner pack during the recent blizzard. That alone has earned her a place at this table." "Saved?" Dominic leaned back in his chair. "Or merely provided shelter? I'm sure any Omega with a warm fire could have done the same." I felt Thorn tense beside me, felt the shift in atmosphere as the other wolves recognized the insult for what it was. This wasn't just about me. This was Dominic testing Kai's authority, questioning his judgment, looking for any sign of weakness. "Actually," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I'd expected. "I provided medical treatment for significant injuries, including battlefield trauma and advanced hypothermia. 3 of the wolves wouldn't have survived without immediate intervention." "So no, Alpha Dominic, not just any Omega with a warm fire could have done the same." Silence fell like a blade. I'd just contradicted a visiting Alpha, defended myself, spoken out of turn, broken probably a dozen unspoken protocols about how Omegas should behave at formal dinners, but I was done being dismissed, done being told my actions didn't matter. Dominic's eyes narrowed. "You have spirit, little Omega," though I wonder if spirit translates to actual skill, or merely to arrogance about basic healing knowledge. I wonder if visiting alphas typically insult their hosts' advisors before the first course is even served, I replied, keeping my tone carefully neutral. Or, if that's a tradition unique to the Eastern Territories. Thorn made a sound that might have been a strangled laugh. Several other wolves around the table were fighting smiles, though Sienna looked like she couldn't decide whether to be impressed or horrified. Kai's expression was unreadable, but I thought I saw something that might have been approval in his silver eyes. "My apologies," Dominic said, though his tone suggested he felt no such thing. "I merely meant to understand what qualifies you for such an elevated position. In my experience, Omega healers are common. Omega healers with council status are unprecedented." "Then perhaps," Kai said softly, "you should expand your experience, Dominic. The world is changing. Packs that cling too tightly to tradition often find themselves left behind." It was a clear warning. A reminder that the Northern Pack's alliance structure and the trade agreements Dominic was here to negotiate depended on Kai's goodwill. Dominic inclined his head in acknowledgement, but his eyes remained cold as they settled on me. "I look forward to seeing this new world you're building, Alpha King. I hope it proves more stable than it appears." Servants entered then with the first course, and the conversation shifted to safer topics: weather, hunting, territory news. But I could feel the undercurrent of tension, could sense the way certain wolves around the table were evaluating me, measuring me, deciding whether I was an asset or a liability to their king. I ate mechanically, hyper-aware of every movement, every word. Beside me, Kai maintained easy conversation with the counselors, but I noticed how he subtly redirected any questions that might put me on the spot, how he kept the focus on pack business rather than on me personally. It was only halfway through the second course that I realized what he was doing, protecting me without making it obvious, giving me space to breathe without appearing weak. Then Sienna spoke up, her green eyes fixed on me with laser focus. "Vera, you mentioned battlefield trauma. Have you had much experience with combat injuries?" It was a test. A subtle way of determining if I actually knew what I was talking about, or if I'd just gotten lucky with the inner pack. "Some," I said carefully, "mostly from treating wolves who got injured during territory disputes or hunting accidents. Claw wounds, broken bones, occasional arrow or blade injuries from confrontations with human settlements, and hypothermia treatment." This from one of the military commanders, a grizzled male with scars crossing his face. "That's specialized knowledge. Where did you learn it?" "From necessity." I met his eyes steadily. "I've lived on the borderlands for years, alone. When you're the only healer available during harsh winters, you either learn how to treat cold exposure or you watch people die. I chose to learn. Self-taught then. Another advisor, this one female, with calculating eyes. No formal training under a pack healer. My mother taught me the basics before she died. Everything else I learned through trial and error and reading every medical text I could get my hands on." "Trial and error," Dominic repeated, and there was condescension in every syllable. "How reassuring. I'm sure the Alpha King's inner pack felt very confident in your trial and error approach while they were bleeding out." My temper flared. "The Alpha King's inner pack is alive because of my trial and error approach. Would you have preferred I let them die while I waited for someone with more impressive credentials to arrive?" "I would have preferred the Alpha King's inner pack not require rescuing by a lone Omega in the first place." Dominic shot back. "Perhaps if they'd been better trained." "Enough." Kai's voice cut through the room like a knife. Not loud, but absolutely commanding. "Dominic, you've made your position clear. You disapprove of my choice to honor Vera's actions with a position in my court. Noted. But this is the Northern Pack, and here, we value results over pedigree. Vera saved my wolves. She's earned her place, and any further questioning of her qualifications will be taken as a direct insult to me personally." The threat was unmistakable. Dominic settled back in his chair, his expression neutral but his eyes promising future retaliation. "Of course, Alpha King. I meant no disrespect." Didn't you?" Kai's smile was sharp. "How fortunate, then, that I'm choosing to interpret it generously." The rest of dinner passed in strained civility. Conversation moved to trade agreements and territorial negotiations, topics where I had nothing to contribute and was grateful to remain silent. But I could feel the weight of judgment still hanging over me, could sense that I'd made enemies tonight simply by existing in a space where some wolves thought I didn't belong. When the meal finally ended, Kai stood, and once again, everyone else rose with him. Counselors, thank you for joining us tonight. Sienna, I'll need those reports on the southern border by morning. Thorn, schedule training exercises for the inner pack. I want everyone back to full combat readiness within the week. His silver eyes swept the room, missing nothing. We're dismissed. The wolves filed out in clusters, some casting curious glances my way, others studiously ignoring me. Dominic paused near the door, his gaze lingering on me with an intensity that made my instincts scream danger. Then he was gone, and only Kai, Thorn, Sienna, and I remained. Well, Thorn said, breaking the silence. That went about as badly as expected. Actually, Sienna said thoughtfully. It could have been worse. She held her ground against Dominic, answered questions competently, and didn't cry or run from the room. By Omega standards at formal dinners with hostile visiting alphas, I'd call that a success. By Omega standards? I repeated, torn between offense and exhaustion. She means you exceeded expectations, Kai said, and there was definite approval in his voice now. Which isn't to say it was easy. Dominic was testing me through you, seeing if I'd defend my choices or back down under pressure. And did I help or hurt your position? You helped. He moved closer, studying my face. You stood up for yourself without being insubordinate. You demonstrated actual knowledge instead of just claiming it. And you made it clear you won't be easily dismissed. His smile was slight but genuine. Well done, little healer. The praise made something warm bloom in my chest. I probably made enemies tonight. You definitely made enemies tonight, Sienna confirmed. Dominic will report back to the Eastern Pack that you're arrogant and overconfident. Half my council thinks you're a liability, and the traditionalists are already planning how to use your presence to challenge Kai's reforms. Again, I said weakly, how comforting. But, Thorn interjected, the other half of the council is impressed. The inner pack already respects you, and you proved tonight that you can handle pressure without breaking. He grinned. Plus, watching you verbally spar with Dominic was the most entertainment we've had at a formal dinner in years. I'm so glad my suffering amuses you. Your suffering amuses everyone, Kai said, but his tone was gentle. Come. I'll walk you back to your quarters. You've had enough politics for one night. Sienna and Thorn said their goodnights and left, leaving me alone with Kai in the flickering candlelight of the dining hall. I meant what I said, he told me as we walked through the quiet corridors. You did well tonight. Better than I'd hoped. I insulted a visiting alpha. You defended yourself against a visiting alpha who was using you to insult me. There's a difference. We climbed the stairs toward my quarters, and I was suddenly very aware of how close he was, how his presence seemed to fill the space around us. Dominic came here to evaluate my strength, to see if my reforms have made the Northern Pack vulnerable. By showing him that even my Omega healer can stand up to an alpha, you proved the opposite. We reached my door, and I turned to face him. What happens now? Now you rest. Tomorrow, you'll meet with the infirmary staff. Familiarize yourself with the healing facilities. Start settling into your role. His expression was serious. It won't get easier, Vera. Tonight was just the beginning. There will be more challenges, more tests, more wolves looking for any excuse to prove you don't belong here. That's not particularly encouraging. No. But here's what is encouraging: you've already survived things that should have killed you. You've already proven you're stronger than anyone gives you credit for. And you're not alone anymore. He reached out and adjusted my cloak, a gesture that felt almost protective. You have the inner pack's loyalty. You have my protection. And whether you believe it yet or not, you have a place here that no one can take away unless you let them. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that this could work, that I could build a life here. But 23 years of disappointment and rejection weren't erased by one successful dinner. Thank you, I said quietly, for defending me tonight, for believing I could handle it. Always, little healer. His silver eyes were intense in the dim light. "Sleep well. Tomorrow is a new beginning." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing in my doorway with my heart racing and my mind spinning with everything that had happened. I stepped inside my quarters and closed the door, leaning against it as the weight of the evening finally crashed over me. I'd survived my first formal dinner at court. I'd stood up to a hostile alpha. I'd made enemies and maybe possibly earned a tiny measure of respect. But as I changed into nightclothes and climbed into the absurdly comfortable bed, I couldn't shake the memory of Dominic's cold eyes. I couldn't forget the way some of the counselors had looked at me like I was a problem to be solved. Kai was building something new, something revolutionary, and I was apparently at the center of it, whether I wanted to be or not. I just hoped I was strong enough to survive what came next, because something told me the real test was still to come. Hit subscribe if watching people tear down someone trying their best makes you angry, because Vera survived tonight, but she needs you in her corner for what's coming. Comment below if you've ever been tested just for existing. This story is for everyone who refused to break. Chapter 7. The Breaking Point. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of overwhelming newness. True to his word, Kai gave me autonomy over the healing facilities. The infirmary was larger than my entire shelter had been, stocked with supplies I'd only dreamed of, staffed by 3 assistant healers who regarded me with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. I threw myself into the work, organizing supplies, treating minor injuries, learning the rhythms of the keep. Work was safe. Work was something I understood. The politics, however, were a minefield I navigated with decreasing success. The traditionalists on the council made their disapproval clear through 1,000 small cuts. They forgot to invite me to important meetings. They questioned my medical decisions in front of patients. They spoke over me during discussions and dismissed my input as the Omega's perspective, said with just enough condescension to make the insult clear. I endured it, kept my head down, focused on my patients and tried to ignore the whispers that followed me through the corridors. But it was the visiting delegations that wore me down most. Word had spread through the 5 territories about Kai's unprecedented decision to give an Omega Council status. Other packs sent representatives, some genuinely curious about the reforms, others clearly looking for evidence that the Northern Pack had grown weak. Each delegation brought new challenges, new tests, new ways of making it clear they found my presence offensive. Kai defended me every time, publicly, firmly, without hesitation, and I hated it. Not because I didn't appreciate his protection, I did, but because every defense made me feel more like a burden than an asset, more like a political statement than a person, more like I was proving the traditionalists right that I was a weakness Kai had to constantly shield. It all came to a head on a gray afternoon in my 4th week at the keep. I was in the infirmary, stitching a deep gash on a young guard's arm. Training accident, he'd said, though the wound looked more like it came from a deliberate blade strike than an accident. I was focused on my work, carefully placing each stitch, when the door slammed open. 3 wolves entered, all wearing the insignia of the council guard. All carrying themselves with the aggressive confidence of those who believed they had authority on their side. The leader was a male I recognized from council meetings, Gareth, one of the senior traditionalists who'd made his disapproval of me abundantly clear from day one. "Omega," he said, not bothering with my name. "You're needed in the main hall. Council session. Now." I didn't look up from my stitching. "I'm with a patient. Whatever it is can wait until..." "It can't wait." Gareth stepped closer, and I felt the young guard tense beneath my hands. "Alpha King's orders. You're to attend immediately." That made me pause. Kai knew better than to summon me mid-treatment. He'd made it clear that my medical work took precedence over politics unless it was a true emergency. "What's the emergency?" I asked, tying off the final stitch and beginning to bandage the wound. "The council has questions about your handling of the supply shortage in the Eastern Infirmary. There are concerns about your competence." My hands stilled. The Eastern Infirmary was a small facility I'd reorganized 2 weeks ago, redistributing supplies more efficiently after discovering they'd been hoarding medications while the main infirmary ran short. It had been a logical, necessary decision, one that had improved patient care across the board. It had also embarrassed the healer who'd been running the Eastern facility, a traditionalist who'd made no secret of his belief that Omegas had no business managing medical facilities. My competence, I repeated slowly, finishing the bandage. Based on what evidence? That's what the council wants to discuss. With you. Now. Gareth's smile was cold. Unless you're refusing a direct summons from the Alpha King? It was a trap. I could feel it. But refusing would be worse than walking into whatever they had planned. Fine. I stood, removing my bloodied apron and washing my hands quickly. Let's go. The walk to the main hall felt like a march to execution. Wolves stopped what they were doing to watch us pass, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed satisfaction. Word had spread fast. The Omega was finally being called to account. The main hall was packed when we arrived. Not just the council, but dozens of other wolves, witnesses, I realized. An audience for whatever public humiliation they had planned. Kai stood at the head of the room, his expression unreadable. Sienna was beside him, her face carefully neutral. Thorn leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, looking furious but contained. And standing in the center of the room, wearing an expression of injured dignity, was Aldrich the healer I displaced from the Eastern Infirmary. "Ah, Vera," said Counselor Brennan, one of the most vocal traditionalists. "Thank you for joining us. We have concerns about your recent reorganization of medical supplies." I kept my voice level. "What concerns?" "Aldrich has brought to our attention that your redistribution of Eastern Infirmary supplies has left them dangerously understocked. He reports that they're now unable to treat serious injuries, and that this puts wolves in that sector at risk." It was a lie. A complete, calculated lie. "That's not accurate," I said clearly. "The Eastern Infirmary was overstocked on non-essential supplies while hoarding critical medications. I redistributed to ensure all facilities had appropriate resources based on patient volume and injury frequency. The Eastern Infirmary now has exactly what it needs, no more, no less." "You question my professional assessment?" Aldrich demanded, his voice dripping with offense. "I've been a pack healer for 30 years. You're an untrained Omega who's been here less than a month. And you think you know better than I do what my facility needs? I think the supply logs speak for themselves," I replied steadily. "The Eastern Infirmary had enough fever reducers stockpiled to treat the entire keep twice over, while the main infirmary was rationing. That's not sound medical practice, that's hoarding." "That's your interpretation," Brennan interjected smoothly. "As an Omega, with no formal training, no oversight, and frankly, no business making decisions that affect pack welfare, she has the Alpha King's authority to make those decisions," Sienna said sharply. "Does she?" Brennan turned to Kai with carefully crafted concern. "Alpha King, with all due respect, this situation highlights exactly what many of us have been trying to explain. Giving unprecedented authority to an unqualified Omega, no matter how well-intentioned, creates risks. She may have saved the inner pack during the blizzard, and for that we're grateful. But gratitude shouldn't override common sense. She lacks the training, the experience, and frankly, the judgment necessary for her position." "Are you suggesting I made an error in judgment, Brennan?" Kai's voice was dangerously soft. "I'm suggesting that perhaps the debt has been paid, that Vera has been honored appropriately for her actions, and that it's time to acknowledge that some roles require more than good intentions." Brennan spread his hands reasonably. She could continue as a healer, of course, under proper supervision. But council status? Access to restricted facilities? That level of trust and responsibility should be reserved for wolves who've proven themselves through years of service, not one dramatic rescue. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about the supply distribution. This was a coordinated effort to strip away my position, to reduce me back to what they thought an Omega should be: useful, perhaps, but firmly subordinate. I looked at Kai, trying to read his expression. He was watching me, not the council, and something in his silver eyes made my breath catch. He was waiting to see what I would do, whether I would defend myself or wait for him to defend me again. And suddenly, I was furious at the constant tests, furious at the endless need to prove myself, furious at being treated like a problem to be managed rather than a person with actual value, furious at Kai for putting me in this impossible position in the first place. "You want to talk about judgment?" I said, and my voice came out harder than I'd intended. Let's talk about judgment. Aldrich has been hoarding medical supplies in a facility that treats maybe 20 wolves a month, while the main infirmary, which treats hundreds, was running critically short. That's not medical oversight. That's ego and territoriality putting wolves at risk. How dare you? Aldrich started. I'm not finished. I turned to face Brennan directly. You say I lack training and experience. You're right. I'm self-taught. I learned healing alone, through trial and error, because no one thought a human-locked Omega deserved proper instruction. But I also learned something you apparently didn't in all your years of formal training, that medical resources exist to save lives, not to hoard for status. This is exactly the kind of arrogance, Brennan began. You want to reduce my role? Strip my authority? Fine. The word came out sharp as broken glass. But let's be honest about what this is really about. It's not about competence or qualifications. It's about the fact that you can't stand seeing an Omega with status equal to yours. You can't handle the idea that someone you consider broken and worthless proved herself more valuable than you in a single night of a blizzard. The room went dead silent. I'd gone too far. I knew it the moment the words left my mouth, but I was past caring. You're right that I don't belong here, I continued, and my voice shook with barely suppressed emotion. Not because I'm unqualified, but because I'm exhausted. Exhausted from the constant tests, the endless judgment, the daily reminders that most of you would rather I didn't exist. I've spent 4 weeks trying to prove I deserve to be here, and it's never enough. It will never be enough, because you've already decided what I am. I turned to Kai, and something in my chest cracked open. You wanted me to be a symbol, proof that your reforms work, that Omegas can have value in your new pack structure. But I'm not a symbol, I'm a person, and I can't keep being your political statement while everyone around me waits for me to fail. Kai's expression was unreadable, but something flickered in his silver eyes: surprise, maybe, or pain. So, here's my answer to your concerns, Counselor Brennan, I said, turning back to face the assembled wolves. I'm done. You want to strip my authority? Consider it surrendered. You want me back in a subordinate role? Congratulations, you win. I'll continue working in the infirmary as a basic healer, under whatever supervision makes you comfortable, but I'm done trying to be something I was never meant to be. I pulled off my cloak, the beautiful midnight blue cloak that marked me as high status, as protected, as valued, and set it carefully on the table. Thank you for the opportunity, Alpha King, but I think we both know this was a mistake. Then I walked out of the main hall, through the shocked silence, past the staring wolves, and didn't look back. I made it halfway to my quarters before the anger dissolved into something that felt dangerously close to grief. I'd tried so hard, given everything I had, and it still hadn't been enough. I was so focused on my spiraling thoughts that I didn't hear the footsteps behind me until a hand caught my arm. I spun, expecting Kai or Thorn or Sienna coming to lecture me about politics and duty, and it was Dominic, the visiting alpha from the Eastern Pack. Still here, apparently. Still watching everything with those cold, calculating eyes. That was quite a performance, little Omega, he said, and his smile made my skin crawl. Tell me, are you always this self-destructive, or is it a special talent you've developed for the Northern Pack? I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Not painfully, but firmly enough to make his point. What do you want? I asked. To make you an offer. His eyes glittered with something predatory. You clearly don't belong here. The Northern Pack doesn't appreciate what you have to offer. But the Eastern Territories, we understand the value of talented healers, especially ones with your particular fortitude. Talent. Understanding crashed over me. You want me to defect? I want to give you an option beyond this gilded cage Kai has built for you. Dominic leaned closer, and I could smell smoke and foreign spices on his skin. Come to the Eastern Pack. No political games, no tests, no pretending to be something you're not. Just honest work, fair compensation, and freedom from this endless judgment. It was tempting, dangerously tempting. But some instinct, the same one that had made me open my door during the blizzard, told me this was a trap wrapped in false promises. No, I said firmly. Thank you for the offer, but no. His expression hardened. You're sure? Because I don't think you understand how badly you just damaged your position here. You publicly defied the council, insulted senior members, and rejected the Alpha King's protection. There's no coming back from that, little Omega. You're finished here. Then I'm finished here. I pulled free of his grip. But I'm not going with you. Pity. Dominic stepped back, and his smile was sharp as a blade. I would have treated you far better than Kai ever could. But if you'd rather fall with the Northern Pack's failed experiment, that's your choice. He walked away, leaving me standing alone in the corridor, trembling with adrenaline, and the growing certainty that I'd just made everything infinitely worse. I didn't go back to my quarters. Instead, I found myself in the infirmary, in the small supply room, where no one would think to look for me. I sank to the floor among the bandages and medications, wrapped my arms around my knees, and let myself finally, privately, break down. I'd tried so hard, fought so desperately to prove I belonged, and I'd failed. Worse, I'd probably destroyed Kai's reforms in the process. Given the traditionalists exactly the ammunition they needed to argue that Omegas couldn't handle positions of authority, I'd been at the keep for 4 weeks, and it had taken exactly 4 weeks for me to prove everyone right that I was broken, arrogant, and completely unsuited for the role Kai had given me. The door opened. I didn't look up, couldn't bear to see whether it was Kai coming to dismiss me, or Sienna coming to lecture me, or Thorn coming to say he'd been wrong about my strength. Little healer. Kai's voice was soft. Careful. We need to talk. I know, I said to the floor. I'll pack my things. I'll leave quietly. I won't make this any harder for you than I already have. Look at me, Vera. I didn't want to. But something in his tone made it impossible to refuse. I raised my eyes to find him crouched in front of me, still in his formal council clothes, his silver eyes intense with an emotion I couldn't name. You're not going anywhere, he said. What? You're not leaving. You're not packing. And you're definitely not surrendering your position because Brennan and his faction of cowards managed to make you feel small. His voice was firm, but there was something gentle underneath. Do you know what I saw in that hall tonight? I shook my head. I saw an Omega stand up to a coordinated attack by some of the most powerful wolves in my council. I saw you defend your decisions with facts and logic instead of appeals to authority. I saw you call out hoarding and poor judgment without flinching. He reached out and tilted my chin up, forcing me to hold his gaze. And I saw you finally stop waiting for me to rescue you and rescue yourself instead. But I failed. I gave up my position. You claimed your agency, he interrupted. You made it clear that you're not here to be my political symbol, that you have your own boundaries and needs. That's not failure, Vera. That's exactly the kind of strength I've been trying to build in this pack. The council will never accept me now. I insulted them. The council will accept what I tell them to accept. His smile was sharp. And what I'm telling them is that you're staying, with full authority restored, because you were absolutely right about the supply hoarding, about Aldrich's ego endangering patient care, and about the fact that most of them are too busy protecting their status to care about actual competence. I stared at him. You can't just, they'll revolt. Let them try. He stood, pulling me to my feet with him. I've been too gentle with the traditionalists, letting them test you, thinking they'd eventually come around. Tonight proved they won't. So we're done playing their games. What does that mean? It means I'm calling their bluff. Tomorrow, I'm making it clear that any counselor who can't work with you is welcome to step down. That the reforms are permanent. That the Northern Pack moves forward, or not at all. His silver eyes were fierce. And it means you're going to stop apologizing for taking up space. You earned your place here, Vera. It's time you believed that. What if I can't? The words came out small and broken. What if they're right, and I really am just a broken Omega, pretending to be something I'm not? Kai cupped my face in his hands, and the gentleness of the gesture nearly undid me. Then you're a broken Omega who saved 25 lives in a blizzard, who reorganized an entire medical system in 4 weeks, who stood up to hostile alphas and councils and constant judgment without breaking. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. You're allowed to be exhausted, Vera. You're allowed to be angry. You're even allowed to doubt yourself. But you are not allowed to give up. Not when we're this close. Close to what? To proving that the new way works. To building a pack where value isn't determined by bloodline or ability to shift. To creating something better. He paused. And maybe, if I'm being honest, close to something that has nothing to do with politics, and everything to do with the fact that I've spent 4 weeks watching you be brave when you had every reason to run, and I'm starting to think. He stopped himself, but the air between us suddenly felt electric. Think what? I whispered. That's a conversation for another time, he said quietly, releasing my face. First, we survive tomorrow's council session. Then, his smile was slight and surprisingly uncertain. Then we'll see. He left before I could ask what that meant, before I could process the implication, before I could do anything but stand there with my heart racing and my entire world tilting on its axis. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight I would rest. And tomorrow, I would face the council again. Only this time, I wouldn't be fighting alone. Chapter 8. The Alpha King's Choice. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat by the window in my quarters, watching the moon track across the sky, and replaying every moment of the disastrous council session. Every word I'd said, every bridge I'd burned, every way I'd potentially destroyed everything Kai had been trying to build. And underneath all of that, his words, spoken in the supply room, with an intensity that made my chest ache. Then we'll see. See what? What had he almost said before stopping himself? Dawn came too quickly, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. I dressed carefully in the midnight blue gown, but I left the cloak where I'd set it on my table. If Kai wanted me at today's council session, I'd go. But I'd go as myself, not as his political statement, not as a symbol of his reforms. Just as Vera, the Omega who'd somehow found herself at the center of a revolution she'd never asked to join. The knock came precisely at sunrise. I opened the door expecting Thorn or Sienna. Instead, I found Kai himself, still in his formal clothes from last night, looking like he hadn't slept either. Walk with me, he said. Not a command, a request. I followed him through the quiet keep, down corridors I'd never explored, until we emerged onto a balcony overlooking the eastern mountains. The view was breathtaking, endless peaks painted in dawn light, valleys still wrapped in shadow, the whole world spread out below us like a promise. My father used to bring me here, Kai said quietly, leaning against the stone railing. After he'd beaten me for some perceived failure, he'd stand right here and tell me that weakness was unforgivable, that mercy was for fools, that a true alpha rules through fear. He was silent for a moment. Then he'd make me watch while he punished whichever servant or Omega had dared to show me kindness. My throat tightened. Kai, I'm not telling you this for sympathy. He turned to face me, and his silver eyes were haunted. I'm telling you because you need to understand what I'm fighting against. My father's legacy. 15 years of trying to build something different, and there are still wolves in my pack who think his way was right, who see my reforms as weakness, who want nothing more than to return to the days when Omegas like you were property instead of people. I know, I said softly. I've lived in that world my entire life. I know you have. Which is why... He stopped, seeming to struggle with something. Vera, what I said last night wasn't entirely true. My stomach dropped. What part? The part about you being a political symbol. About needing you to prove the reforms work. He moved closer, and I could see exhaustion written in the lines of his face. That was true at first. When I brought you here, I thought this is perfect. An Omega who saved my inner pack. A clear demonstration that compassion and competence matter more than bloodline. I thought if I could integrate you successfully, it would strengthen everything I'd built. And now? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Now I realize that was incredibly unfair to you. That I used your gratitude and your isolation to manipulate you into a position you never should have had to fight for alone. That I put you in the center of a political battle and expected you to just endure it. His jaw tightened. Last night, when you walked out of that hall, when you stripped off that cloak and told me this was a mistake, you were right. Not about being unqualified or not belonging, but about the fact that I made you into a symbol instead of treating you like a person. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to argue, to tell him it wasn't that simple. But a larger part recognized the truth in his words. So what happens now? I asked. Now I give you a real choice. Not the false choice I gave you at your shelter, come with me, or be followed by 300 wolves. A real one. He took a breath. Stay, not as my political proof or my reformation project. Stay as my healer, with the authority and status you've earned through your own actions. Help me build this pack into something better, and let me paused, and something vulnerable flickered across his face. Let me get to know you as Vera, not as the Omega who saved my pack. As the woman who reads medical texts by firelight and organizes supplies with ruthless efficiency and somehow makes me laugh even in council meetings. My heart was beating so hard I could barely hear over it. Or leave. I'll provide you with resources, protection, a place in any territory you choose. The debt is paid. The obligation is fulfilled. You're free to go wherever you want, be whoever you want, without the weight of my reforms or my court or my well. He stopped himself again. You're what? I whispered. He looked at me for a long moment, and the intensity in his silver eyes stole my breath. My hope, he said finally. That maybe you'd choose to stay not because you owe me, not because of duty or debt, but because you want to. Because you see something worth staying for. The words hung between us like a held breath. I thought about my shelter, about the quiet, safe life I'd built alone, about the fact that leaving the keep would mean returning to obscurity, to being forgotten, to never having to prove myself again. And I thought about the last 4 weeks, the challenges and the tests and the constant judgment, but also the infirmary and the patients who'd started to trust me, Thorne's friendship and Sienna's grudging respect, the feeling of building something that mattered, even when it was hard, and Kai, looking at me like I was something precious instead of something broken. I want to tell you a story, I said. He blinked, surprised. What? A riddle, actually, one my mother taught me before she died. I moved to stand beside him at the railing, looking out over the mountains. What breaks when you speak its name? Kai was quiet for a moment. I don't know. Most people don't. They guess things like silence or secrets or promises. I smiled slightly. But the real answer is simpler. What breaks when you speak its name is nothing. Because the riddle is designed to make you think there's something fragile that shatters at a word, when really, nothing worth having breaks that easily. I don't understand. I've spent my entire life being told I'm broken, that I'm fragile, that one wrong word or one hard moment will shatter me completely. I turned to face him. But I'm not broken, Kai. I'm scarred and exhausted and absolutely terrified of failing. But I'm not fragile. I don't shatter. I know, he said softly. Do you? Because for 4 weeks, you've been protecting me, defending me, shielding me from the worst of the council's hostility, and I appreciate it, I do. But it also made me feel like you thought I couldn't handle it, like you thought I'd break. I was trying to help. I know. But what I need isn't protection from every hard moment. What I need is, I struggled to find the words. I need to know that you trust me to fight my own battles, that you'll stand beside me instead of in front of me, that you see me as strong enough to handle whatever comes, even when I'm scared. Kai studied me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled, and it was different from any smile I'd seen from him before. Warm and genuine and tinged with something that looked almost like relief. You're right, he said. I've been treating you like you need saving, when what you actually needed was backup. He held out his hand. So here's my promise, Vera. If you stay, I won't shield you from the fights. I'll stand with you through them. I won't make decisions for you. I'll trust you to make your own. And I won't expect you to be perfect or unbreakable or anything other than exactly who you are. I looked at his outstretched hand. At the man who'd brought me here with false choices and impossible expectations. Who'd put me in an untenable position and then defended me with everything he had. Who'd seen value in a broken Omega, when everyone else saw only liability. Who was now offering me something I'd never had before, genuine partnership instead of protection. I took his hand. I'm staying, I said. Not because I owe you, Not because of debt or duty or politics, but because I want to see what we can build together. The pack, the reforms, all of it. And us? The question was quiet, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard from him before. I don't know what us means yet, I admitted. I'm still figuring out how to be Vera the healer in your court. Adding anything else to that right now feels overwhelming, he finished. I understand. But he didn't release my hand. Can I tell you what I see when I look at you? You already did. You see strength and… No. He stepped closer. That's what I saw at first. What I see now is different. His thumb traced small circles on the back of my hand. I see someone who makes me want to be better, who challenges me to live up to my own ideals instead of just talking about them, who looks at me like I'm just Kai. Not the Alpha King or the reformer or the son trying to escape his father's shadow. Just me. My breath caught. Kai, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm just telling you. Because I'm done keeping things from you, done manipulating situations. If we're doing this, the partnership, the reforms, all of it, then you deserve honesty. He paused. So here's my honesty. I brought you here for political reasons, but I want you to stay for entirely personal ones. And if you ever decide you want to explore what us could mean, I'll be here. Waiting. For as long as it takes. I should have been terrified. Should have pulled away. Reminded him about power dynamics and the impossibility of an Omega and an Alpha King. Should have protected myself from the inevitable heartbreak. Instead, I squeezed his hand. Ask me again in 6 months. When I've had time to figure out who I am here. When we've survived whatever political nightmare today's council session brings. When we're both sure this isn't just gratitude, proximity, the heat of dramatic moments. His smile was crooked. I can wait 6 months, little healer. I can wait 6 years if that's what you need. Let's start with 6 months, I said, and felt something warm bloom in my chest. We stood there, as the sun rose higher, still holding hands, and I felt something fundamental shift. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. The foundation of something that could become more. Given time and trust, and the space to grow. We should go, Kai said finally. The council will be gathering soon. Are you really going to make them choose? Support the reforms or step down? Yes. His expression hardened. I've been too patient with the traditionalists, too willing to compromise. Last night proved they'll never truly accept the changes. They'll just keep undermining them until the whole structure collapses. He looked at me. It's time to draw a line. And Vera, I need you beside me when I do it. Not behind me, beside me. Then that's where I'll be. We walked back through the keep together, and this time when wolves stopped to stare, I didn't look away. I held my head high, very aware of Kai beside me, not protecting me, not shielding me, but simply present. A reminder that I wasn't fighting alone. The council chamber was already full when we arrived. The same wolves from last night, plus several others who'd clearly been summoned for this showdown. Brennan and his faction sat on one side, Sienna and the reformists on the other. The battle lines were drawn. Dominic was there too, I noticed. Still watching everything with those calculating eyes, probably hoping to witness the northern pack tear itself apart. Kai didn't go to the head of the table. Instead, he stood in the center of the room, commanding attention without needing a throne. Thank you all for coming, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly. I called this session because last night made something very clear. We've reached a crossroads, and it's time to decide which path we're taking. Alpha King, Brennan began. If this is about the Omega's outburst, it's about far more than that. Kai's voice cut through like a blade. It's about the fact that 15 years after I took power, there are still wolves in my pack who think strength comes from domination, who see compassion as weakness, who would rather return to my father's brutal hierarchy than embrace real change. Murmurs rippled through the room. Last night, you orchestrated a public attack on my healer, Kai continued, his silver eyes fixing on Brennan. You used false claims about supply hoarding to question her competence. You gathered witnesses to humiliate her. You did everything in your power to prove she didn't belong here. He paused. And in doing so, you proved that the real threat to this pack isn't Omega healers with council status. It's traditionalists who prioritize their own power over pack welfare. That's not fair, one of the other traditionalists protested. Isn't it? Sienna interjected sharply. Brennan, you've spent 4 weeks trying to undermine Vera's authority. You've questioned her decisions, excluded her from meetings, and poisoned opinion against her at every turn. All while patient care improved under her oversight, supply distribution became more efficient, and the infirmary operated at higher capacity than it has in years. She's an untrained Omega, Brennan shot back. Her improvements are luck, not skill. And the moment something goes wrong, she'll handle it, I said, stepping forward. Just like I've handled every other challenge you've thrown at me for 4 weeks. Just like I'll continue handling them, whether you approve or not. Brennan's face flushed. You have no right to speak in this council. You surrendered your position last night when you oxied. When I set a boundary, I interrupted. When I made it clear I wouldn't be your political punching bag anymore. That's not surrender, counselor. That's self-respect. Something you might consider developing. Several wolves made sounds that could have been shock or suppressed laughter. Here's what's going to happen, Kai said, his voice brooking no argument. The reforms are permanent. Omegas with demonstrable skill and competence will have access to positions of authority. Pack structure will be based on merit and loyalty, not bloodline. And anyone who can't accept that is welcome to leave the Northern Pack and find a territory more suited to their traditional values. The room erupted. Wolves on both sides started talking at once, some in agreement, others in outrage. Brennan stood, his face red with fury. You can't exile half your council for disagreeing with you. That's tyranny, not leadership. I'm not exiling anyone, Kai said calmly. I'm giving you a choice. Stay and support the pack I'm building, or leave and build something else elsewhere. But what you cannot do is stay and undermine everything we're working toward. And if we choose to stay and vote against your reforms in council, another traditionalist demanded, then you vote against them. That's how councils work. Kai's smile was sharp. But you vote in good faith, based on genuine concerns about policy, not based on prejudice against Omegas or attachment to the way things used to be. You debate, you disagree, you compromise. What you don't do is orchestrate coordinated attacks on individual pack members to prove political points. He turned to address the whole room. I became Alpha King to change things. To build a pack where worth isn't determined by birth or by how powerful your wolf is, where Omegas have agency, Betas have voice, and everyone has a chance to contribute based on their actual abilities. That vision isn't negotiable. If you can work within it, even if you disagree with specific policies, then I want you here. But if you fundamentally oppose the idea that wolves like Vera deserve status and respect, then we have nothing more to discuss. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, Sienna stood. I support the Alpha King's vision. I always have. And for the record, Vera has been the most competent healer we've had in my 15 years on this council. Thorn stood next. The inner pack stands with the Alpha King. And with Vera. One by one, the reformists stood. Then, some of the moderates. Then, surprisingly, a few wolves I'd thought were traditionalists rose as well, wolves who apparently valued competence over ideology. Brennan remained seated, along with 5 other hardline traditionalists. They looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Brennan stood. But not in support. I cannot serve in a pack that elevates Omegas above their station, he said stiffly. I believe you're making a grave mistake, Alpha King. I believe these reforms will weaken the Northern Pack and invite challenges from territories that maintain proper hierarchy. But I also believe in the old laws that an Alpha's word is law within his territory. He inclined his head with bitter respect. I will leave by week's end and seek position in a pack more aligned with traditional values. The 5 others nodded agreement. Kai's expression was unreadable. You'll leave with honor, full provisions, and letters of recommendation. I don't agree with your views, but I respect your service to this pack. You've earned a dignified departure. It was more generosity than Brennan deserved. More than I would have offered. But I understood what Kai was doing, showing that you could disagree fundamentally and still maintain respect. proving that his new pack structure had room for dissent, just not for active sabotage. Brennan seemed to understand too. His expression softened slightly. "Thank you, Alpha King. I hope." He paused, looking at me. "I hope I'm wrong about this. For all our sakes." Then he walked out, followed by the other traditionalists, leaving a council chamber that suddenly felt lighter, cleaner. "Well," Sienna said into the silence, "that was dramatic." Kai laughed a real laugh, full of relief and exhaustion. "Understatement, Sienna." He looked around at the remaining council members. "We have work to do, positions to fill, policies to review, and a pack to run. But first," he turned to me. "Vera, I believe you dropped something last night." He held out my midnight blue cloak. I took it slowly, understanding what he was offering. Not just the cloak, but everything it represented. Status, authority, a place in his council earned through my own actions. "Thank you," I said quietly, fastening it around my shoulders. "Always, little healer." His silver eyes held mine for a moment longer than necessary, warm with promise. "Always." The council session continued for another 3 hours, reorganizing, planning, discussing how to move forward. But I barely heard most of it. I was too busy processing everything that had happened, everything that had changed. I'd come to the keep as a desperate Omega who'd saved some wolves in a storm. I'd been made into a political symbol, tested and challenged and nearly broken. And I'd survived. Not by being perfect. Not by never faltering. But by being exactly who I was, scarred and stubborn and strong enough to keep standing even when standing was the hardest thing I'd ever done. 6 months later, I stood on the same balcony where Kai had offered me a real choice. The keep had changed in countless small ways. New healers had joined the infirmary, Omegas and Betas who'd heard about the reforms and wanted to be part of something different. The council ran more smoothly with wolves who actually believed in the vision instead of fighting it at every turn. Patient care had improved across all territories, and I had changed too. I was no longer the terrified Omega who'd walked through these gates wearing a cloak that felt like a costume. I was Vera Healer, council member, friend to Thorn and cautious ally to Sienna. I knew the rhythms of the keep, knew which battles to fight and which to let go, knew my own worth in a way I never had before. "You're thinking too hard," Kai's voice came from behind me. I can hear it from inside. I turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, still in his council clothes, watching me with an expression that had become increasingly familiar over the past 6 months. Warm, interested, patient, just remembering, I said. 6 months ago, you stood here and told me to ask you again in 6 months. I remember. He moved to stand beside me at the railing, close enough that our shoulders brushed. "Are you asking?" I looked at him, really looked at him. At the Alpha King, who'd gambled his reforms on a broken Omega. At the man who'd learned to stand beside me instead of in front of me. At Kai, who made me laugh during council meetings and brought me new medical texts and looked at me like I was exactly what he'd been searching for. "I'm asking," I said quietly. "What did you mean when you said you wanted to know what us could mean?" His smile was slow and devastating. "I meant that 6 months ago, I thought you were remarkable for saving my pack. Now I think you're remarkable for about 1,000 other reasons that have nothing to do with heroic rescues. Such as the way you organize supply closets with ruthless efficiency, the way you argue with me in council meetings when you think I'm wrong, the way you care about every single patient who comes through your infirmary, even the ones who still don't think Omegas should have your position." He turned to face me fully. "Such as the way you make me want to be better, not as an Alpha King, but as a person." My heart was racing. "That's a lot of remarkable. You're a lot of remarkable, little healer." He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering. "So here's my question. 6 months ago, I said I'd wait as long as you needed, and I meant it. But I'd really like to stop waiting. I'd like to explore what this could be, what we could be." His silver eyes were intense. "If you want that too." I thought about the riddle my mother had taught me. About things that break when you speak their name. About how nothing worth having shatters that easily. "I want that too," I said. His smile could have lit the entire keep. "Yeah? Yeah, but Kai? I need you to understand something first. What? I'm still figuring out who I am here. I'm still going to doubt myself sometimes. I'm still going to be scared and exhausted and occasionally want to run back to my shelter in the borderlands. I held his gaze. I'm not going to be easy. Good, he said. Easy is boring. I prefer remarkable. Then he kissed me. It was gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid I'd pull away. But I didn't. I leaned into it, into him, into the promise of something I'd never thought I'd have. The kiss deepened, and I felt 6 months of tension and possibility finally, resolving into something real. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. So, Kai said, his voice slightly unsteady, does this mean you're staying, permanently? I'm staying, I confirmed. Not because you rescued me or because I owe you anything, but because this is where I want to be, where I belong. With me? With you, with the pack, with this impossible, terrifying, wonderful thing we're building together. I smiled. Though fair warning, I'm probably going to drive you crazy. You already do, little healer. He pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me. You already do. We stood there as the sun set over the mountains, the Alpha King and the Omega who couldn't shift, and I felt something fundamental settle in my chest. I was home, not because of grand rescues or dramatic gestures or political reforms, though those had brought me here, but because I'd finally found a place where being broken didn't make me worthless, where my scars were proof of survival instead of shame, where someone looked at me and saw not what I lacked, but everything I was. Kai? I said against his chest. Thank you, for seeing something worth saving. His arms tightened around me. Always, Vera. Always. And I believed him. If Vera's journey from broken Omega to powerful healer resonated with you, you'll love this book on the screen titled Rejected by the Alpha. It's a glow-up revenge romance about an Omega who refuses to stay down after rejection. And trust me, the revenge is satisfying. Grab your copy using the link in the description below. And if you enjoyed Vera's story, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional wolf shifter romances that celebrate the underdogs, the broken, and the ones who refuse to give up. Drop a comment telling me what you thought of Vera and Kai's ending. I read every single one. See you in the next story.